to read this book, Billions, Billions, Zillions. I always wanted to have some good intuition about numbers and math, but I couldn't get it till now because I was kind of having a busy life, but the life that I didn't really want, so it was always longing hard to wait for the day to come, which I can be joyfully study, but it's kind of ending happily. I mean, it's kind of ending finally, but through that I'm trying to find a way that I can really be happy without giving up my dream, but also giving up some things that I cannot achieve with what I want. So yeah, whatever, it's not important. The important thing is that I'm going to read this book. This is one of the parts of my dream, so let's go. It's a book by Brian W. Kernigan. Yeah, I already read the preface, but I'll just do it again and we'll just keep reading without any other things to say. Okay. Preface. When you have mastered numbers, you will in fact no longer be reading numbers any more than you read words when reading books. You will be reading meanings. I said I wouldn't say something, but I could relate with this so much. I mean, not relate, but this is how I want to learn math. I mean, I set my goal of studying as learning math like a language, because I really love learning language, new languages, or even my own language. But I also love learning something from solving math problems or doing math things, but it's not that professional the level is. So now I want to improve it, but I set my goal like, as I love learning language, I want to understand math as a language so that I can read and understand the meaning of the functions and some things like that, equations as a word, language, sentence, so that I can understand and use it like a language. And isn't it true that math is also kind of a language that mathematicians use? So they doesn't have to translate, but need to study the math things, and without translating the actual language they use, they can just understand through the numbers. It's so amazing. So I wanted to do that too. So I'll just keep reading. It was the review by W.E.B. Du Bois, sociologist, writer, and civil rights activist. Just in case, if my pronunciation is wrong, I'm sorry. Next, you don't have to be a mathematician to have a feel for numbers. I love this too. I love this review too. John Nash, mathematician and Nobel Prize winner. On average, people should be more skeptical when they see numbers. They should be more willing to play around with the data themselves. Nate Silver, statistician. People should be more skeptical when they see numbers. They should be more willing to play around with the data themselves. Great. So, we are surrounded by numbers. Computers produce them at a furious rate, and they are passed along by politicians, reporters, and bloggers, and included in the endless advertising barrage that we are all subjected to. Indeed, the flow of numbers is so high that most people, including me, can't cope, and our brains tune it all out. At best, we take away a vague impression that something is important and should be believed because it has numbers attached to it. Tuning out is a bad strategy, however, since most of those numbers are intended to convince us of something, whether to behave a particular way or believe some politician or buy a gadget or get something to eat or make an investment. The goal of this book is to help you to assess the numbers that you encounter every day and to be able to produce numbers of your own when you have to, for your own good or merely as a counterweight to what you are being told by others. You should be able to recognize potential problems in what you hear and to be leery of taking too much at face value. This book will help you to be intelligently skeptical about the numbers that you see, to be able to reason about them, decide whether some claim might be true or is clearly false, and to compute your own numbers when you need them to make important decisions. The general approach is to look at an example of some numeric value that's clearly, or at least probably wrong. Show how you can deduce that it's wrong. Help you come up with your own number that's more likely to be right. And finally, to draw some general lessons. Once you've been properly armed, there are many different ways in which you can look after yourself. The primary thing you need is common sense, augmented by healthy skepticism, basic facts, and a few ways of reasoning. It will help you if you've become comfortable doing approximate arithmetic. Few problems need precise computation, and there are shortcuts to make it easier. We'll talk about them along the way. The book is aimed at anyone who wants to be better informed and a lot more cautious about believing what they are being told. There is so much misinformation and deliberate falsehood today that we really have to pay attention if we hope to spot the errors, the outright lies, and the subtle misrepresentations and exaggerations. None of this is rocket science, and it's not mathematics either. I've heard all too many people say I was never any good at math. They're being unfair to themselves. What that really means is that they were not well taught and never got much chance to use simple arithmetic in the service of day-to-day life. The material here requires nothing beyond elementary school arithmetic. If you got to grade 5 or 6 in the United States or the equivalent somewhere else, that's all the technical or math background you need. After that, you just have to use your head and what you already know. You may even find that it's fun. Okay, that's great. Acknowledgement. I am deeply indebted to John Bentley for his detailed comments on literally every page of multiple drafts of the manuscript. The book is much the better for John's contributions. Paul Carnegie provided a number of fine examples, and his eagle eye spotted an embarrassingly large number of typographical errors. Any remaining typos are entirely my fault. I am also grateful for helpful suggestions from Josh Block, Stu Feldman, Jonathan Frankel, Song Chang-ha, Gerald Holtzman, Vicky Kern, I'm not sure, Mark Carnegie, Harry Lewis, Steve Law, Madeline Planix Crocker, Arnold Robbins, Jonas Sinowitz, Howard Trickey, and Peter Weinberger. The production team at Princeton University Press: Lauren Buka, Nathan Kaw, Lauren Duneker, Dmitry Karantnikov, and Susan Shoemaker has been a pleasure to work with. As always, my profound thanks to my wife, Meg, for insightful comments on the manuscript and for her support, enthusiasm, and good advice for many years. I'd also like to acknowledge the newspapers and magazines, especially the New York Times, that have provided many of the examples here. They occasionally make mistakes, but they publish corrections. In a time of far too much fake news and outright lies, it's invaluable to have sources that care so much about truth and accuracy. The website at ZILLIONS.com has examples that didn't make it into the book, and new ones will be added over time. Please send along anything you find. I'd love to hear from you. Millions, billions, zillions. Okay, I will just read 1 or 2 pages more. Chapter 1. Getting started. How many cars are there? The author is stuck in yet another endless traffic jam. I've asked myself this question any number of times when I'm in traffic jam with no end in sight, just immobile cars as far as the eye can see. This has happened to me in the United States, Canada, England, and France over the past few years. You've undoubtedly had similar experiences somewhere. So how many cars are there? You might wonder about the number on the road ahead, or in the town you live in, or the total in your home country. Stop right now. Don't reach for your computer or your phone. Don't ask Siri or Alexa. Imagine that you're in a situation where you simply can't ask. Perhaps your traffic jam is out in the countryside where there is no cell service, or you're on a plane without internet connectivity, or maybe you're in an interview where a prospective employer wants to see whether you can think for yourself. Great. Your job is to figure out sensible answers on your own without consulting any other sources. In other words, to come up with an estimate. Dictionary.com defines the known estimate as an approximate judgment or calculation as of the volume, amount, time, size or weight of something. And the verb as to form an approximate judgment or opinion regarding the worth, amount, size, weight, etc. of. That's exactly what you should do first. Make your own estimate first. As a specific example, let's estimate the number of cars in the United States. The way we approach this would be the same in other parts of the world, though the details might be different. It's often easiest to work from the bottom up, starting from something concrete that you know or have experience with, then build on that to the general situation. I'll start with my own experience. There are three people in my immediate family, and we each have one car. If it were that simple, one car per person, then we're done. The population of the US today is around 330 million, so there are 330 million cars. And for many purposes, that estimate would be entirely adequate. A rough estimate is often good enough. Notice that our estimate came from two things: personal experience and knowledge of the single fact, the approximate population of the country. As we'll see in the rest of the book, we can make remarkably good estimates without detailed knowledge, but in the end, we do have to know something. The more you know, the better your estimate. 330 million is probably too high, since many people don't have cars. Children up to some age like 18 or 20, elderly people who no longer drive, and of course those who live in big cities where parking is expensive and public transportation is good. On the other side, some people will have more than one car, but that's likely to be much less common. Taking such factors into account, we can refine the estimate of 330 million. If more than half of the population in the US has a car, perhaps even 2/3 or 3/4, that leads to a more refined estimate of 200 to 250 million cars. Refine your estimate if necessary. Don't forget the if necessary part. Very often, a rough answer is entirely adequate, and sometimes there's no way to get information that would make it possible to refine anyway. We'll see plenty of examples of that along the way, and chapter 13 offers some advice and a chance to practice. We'll also see examples where people claim more knowledge. And more accuracy than they could possibly have. That's a sign of something sketchy going on. If you've done your own estimation before accepting someone else's values, you'll be alert for such situations. If we now turn to a computer or phone, we can compare our estimate to other sources. For instance, Wikipedia says that there were an estimated 263.6 million registered passenger vehicles in the United States in 2015. The top Google hit is a story from the Los Angeles Times that says 253 million cars. Our estimate is certainly close to those, which is an encouraging sign. Independent estimates should be similar. Consensus is a good sign, unless everyone is making the same error. If two independently created estimates are significantly different, however, something is awry and at least one of them is wrong. Now that we have a decent value for the number of cars, we can think about related questions. For example, how many miles does a typical car get driven in a year? How long does it last? How many cars are sold each year? How much does it cost to own a car? How many miles does a car travel in a year? As above, it's useful to start with personal experience or observation. For instance, suppose you or some family member commutes to work 20 miles each way. That's 200 miles in a week, and thus about 10,000 miles in a 50-week year. Again, there will be a lot of variability. Some people will have longer commutes, while others will have shorter, and still others will use public transportation. Short weeks and vacation trips and who knows what else will change the estimate to some extent, but many of these effects will average out. Too big and too small tend to average out. My auto insurance policy says that the premium for each of the family cars is based on an average of 27 miles per day, which on the surface is a strange number. But 365 times 27 is 9,855, which is close to 10,000. I suspect that this is not a coincidence. The insurance company knows that 10,000 miles per year is a good representative value. How long does a car last? I've owned quite a few cars over the years, tending to drive them until they really start to fall apart. My last one was 17 years old and had 180,000 miles. I probably hang on longer than the norm, so we might choose a round number, say 100,000 miles or 10 years, though this is definitely a rough estimate. What about people who lease a new car every few years? When they upgrade, someone else will acquire a lightly used car and it will go on to a typical lifetime, so 10 years is still reasonable. How many new cars are sold each year? If there are 250 million cars and each lasts 10 years, then 1/10 of them, or about 25 million, must be replaced each year. If instead they last 15 years, then 16 or 17 million will be replaced. This is an example of a kind of conservation law. A car that reaches the end of its life will generally be replaced by a new one. Of course, that assumes a steady state, which isn't true with a growing population or fluctuating economic conditions, but it's a reasonable assumption for getting started. Chapter 7 talks more about conservation laws. Conservation. What goes in must come out. Okay, I read it again. What goes in must come out. How much does it cost to own a car? For practice, you might estimate how much per mile it costs to drive. This includes variable costs like fuel, fixed costs like insurance, unpredictable costs like repairs, and the money you will need for a new car when the old one dies. You may have noticed that for all of the estimates above, we used no arithmetic operations more complicated than multiplication and division, and we rounded off numeric values ruthlessly to make the computations easy. Multiplication, division, and approximate arithmetic are good enough. This will be true of the rest of the book as well. We are not doing mathematics, but elementary school arithmetic in a really relaxed way. Chapter 12 has a more extended discussion of arithmetic with some shortcuts and rules of thumb to make it easier. Okay, with some shortcuts and rules of thumb to make it easier. I've written this chapter mostly in terms of cars, which may not be of direct interest to you. But even if not, in later chapters we'll see that the approaches and techniques are applicable to any situation where you have to estimate something from incomplete information. Most of the time, you can get a value by looking it up, but you will be much better off it before you resort to a search engine. You make your own estimate. It won't take long and you'll quickly get good at it. Practice will arm you for a lifetime of being worried about what people are telling you. If you have already thought about some numeric value and have done a bit of easy arithmetic, it's much less likely that someone can put something over on you. Note on units. Given the accident of where I live, the majority of the examples in this book come from American sources. I'm not too worried about this fact. Any part of the world will have similar stories. I'm more concerned that the units of measure in many examples, lengths, weights, capacities, are expressed in English units because the US is almost unique in not adopting the metric system and still uses English units for pretty much all weights and measures. Readers who are not familiar with feet, pounds, and gallons may sometimes be perplexed by unfamiliar units. I've tried to alleviate this when possible, but failing to get the units right is often the point of the story. Meanwhile, here's a list of the common English units that appear in the book, which approximate conversions to and from metric units. For example, 1 inch is a 2.54 centimeter, 2.54 centimeter, and 1 foot is 12 inches, which is 30.48 centimeter. 1 yard is 3 feet, which is 0.9144 meters, etc., etc., etc. It's hard for me. Okay, this is the chapter 1 is almost end. And after the blah blah blah, if you look at these conversions carefully, you can see some handy approximations, which is 1 meter is almost 1 yard, 1 kilogram is almost 2 pounds, 1 liter is almost 1 quart, 1 Celsius degree is almost 2 Fahrenheit degrees. These are all within 10% of the true values. If you really need more accuracy, then add these adjustment factors, adding 10%. Okay. The adjusted values are all within about 1% of the true values, which will almost always be good enough for making estimates. Ooh, this is the end of the chapter 1. And it was really nice to read this kind of book, even though it wasn't really what I expected, but I think it really can give me some practical intuitions for math and numbers. Really, which is so great. So I will keep reading this, and I will bring the chapter 2 with you guys next time too. There will be so many noisy things, but I hope it can just give you some relaxing moments, even though my wrong pronunciation and mumbling bubbling would make it a little bit annoying maybe, but I hope you can just turn it like, you can just accept it like a white noise. I hope, whatever, I hope I can just introduce some good book and read it with you guys. Like, you can just turn it on while doing something else, like doing the house chores. So